Welcome, one and all, to another Warlock's Gantlet devlog. Devlog number 6. Warlock's Gantlet is a game I've been working on for a little over 4.5 years now. It is a first-person, open-world action-adventure game. Possibly it will contain enough RPG mechanics to qualify as an ARPG as well, but that remains to be seen. What you're looking at here is a video of a monitor showing game capture from a gaming session in the Steam alpha demo that you can obtain on the Steam store page for the game, which I will link in the description if you're curious. I'm showing this because it demonstrates what the action aspect of the game is meant to be like. You won't be seeing much more of this, if any at all, during the rest of this video, because I'm currently working on completely different aspects of the game, and have been doing so for well over a year. So today I will tell the tale of what has happened since last devlog, and that's quite a bit. So let me catch you up on the situation as it was right then, a couple of weeks after the last devlog. This is the state of the game as it was soon after the release of the last devlog. I had an open world with an impressive draw distance, and I had these proto-buildings with placeholder textures for roofs and walls. Was very much looking forward to making little towns and villages with these, as well as equipping them with enterable shops using the shop code I had been writing some time earlier. But there were a few things that were sort of gnawing at the back of my mind, and one of them was the state of the code base, which had been bothering me for, I'd say, 1 or 2 years at that point. I've been kind of developing the desire to rewrite it from scratch, but I thought that was something I should avoid, that would just hamper the project. At the same time though, while developing the open world, I had rewritten a large chunk of it already, so I thought, it wasn't such a big undertaking anymore in my mind. It felt like maybe a third of the work had already been done, as I had exchanged a very large part of the fundamentals of the engine, really. The basic data structure for the world went from being a 3-dimensional one to a 2-dimensional one, which is a big change. Then, soon after that, the game started developing some really serious bugs, and I had a devil of a time trying to solve them. I couldn't even really find the real reason for them, and that kind of tipped me over the edge, because I thought, well, either I can patch these up and hope that I've solved the problem, or maybe the problem, because it's so difficult, is kind of fundamental to the code base. So it was becoming very attractive to rewrite the whole thing and achieve higher stability at the foundation. And so I made that decision to rewrite from the ground up, or to put it somewhat differently, port the whole code base to my current programming ideology or paradigm. So I started taking all the files from the old code base and transferring them to a new project, and for each file I updated the style to my current style of programming, to my current paradigm, which is a very low-level C-like imperative programming paradigm, actually dropping a lot of the object-oriented mannerisms I picked up in C++. It's still written in C++, mind you, but it's a very C-like C++. One of the major changes is that I am micromanaging most of the memory, for example, which is not something I've really done before, but I find it very appealing. And so I shall take you now on the journey of the story of the rewrite, what I have achieved since then. It has gone very well. So I hope you will enjoy hearing about it, because I have certainly enjoyed working on it. The first thing I turned my mind to right after setting up the basic framework of the engine was the texture mapper. Now, the texture mapper worked fine for the most part, except for a couple of minor and rare bugs. But those bugs originated in a portion of the code that I didn't like very much and had been the source of several other bugs. So I decided to rewrite at least that part in order to just make the new texture mapper easier to debug and more stable. I didn't think that the rewrite would result in increased performance by more than maybe 10% or so. But to my great surprise and delight, it did. And the performance is, I estimate, somewhere between 3 and 5 times greater than before. And that might be lowballing it somewhat. This footage is from, let's say, the middle of the development period of the new texture mapper. As always happens for me, I ran into a number of interesting bugs, and when you're working with graphical tech, the bugs are often spectacular. So I decided that this time around I should try to capture all of the more interesting ones so I could show them to you. Because frankly, I wouldn't know how to do this on purpose, but I was lucky enough to hit upon this spectacular display by accident. It has been solved, but here we are. I'll showcase a few more interesting bugs, although I think this is the only one that concerns the texture mapper to any great extent. Here is some footage from a while later in development, when I have a world set up and I'm working on the long distance landscape renderer. In the near distance you can see the full 3D render using the texture mapping technique, but the distance is supposed to be rendered in the other way, my pseudo 3D or 2.5D method that I developed for large distances. And right now it's it's lacking in a couple of ways, or here it is lacking. For one, it's not really drawing the sides of these columns or cliffs, only the top of the whatever surface we're looking at. And it is not fading correctly into the sky color, the background color, but rather kind of cycling through all the colors of the rainbow. I called this video clip the color palette because to me this looks like, especially from a great distance, looks like dried color on a palette. I do a lot of oil painting, and I have done all my life, and this can be very similar to dried up blobs of color on an old color palette. Closest I've ever got to recreating that in a computer program, that's for certain. Here is some footage from just a little bit later, when clearly I've managed to make the renderer draw the sides of the cliffs as well, but the color fading problem persists. Although, of course I wanted to solve it, but I loved looking at this. This was a big delight to look at, and I'm glad that I preserved it for posterity. Here is some footage after I solved the color problem, but which displays the laser beam bug right there. That was a peculiar bug of the long distance render that I wished I'd captured the last time I wrote it, but this time I got it, happily. Very short clip though. This clip does not showcase a bug, but rather a developmental step of a feature. If you pay attention to the polygons, they appear monochrome because they are, but they are also texture mapped. I am testing the concept of an average color, which is when I take a texture and add up all of its non-transparent pixels, and then take the average RGB value of all of them, and store it. Then, which is not showcased in this video, but later you will see that when I draw a texture on screen, I will then blend in that average color with each of its pixels, the more and more the further away the texture is. And the reason for that is that at the sort of low resolutions that I use in my engine, because it's such a low performance engine, really high contrast textures have a lot of pixel shimmer, as it's called. As the texture is scaled up or down as you approach or recede from it, the pixels that are shown on screen kind of often switch places, the relative places, and it looks like the texture is flickering or shimmering. And with high contrast colors, it can be really quite bothersome to look at. Some people are very sensitive to it. And the most sensitive people likely won't enjoy playing this game no matter what, because of the low resolution. But I really wanted to try and reduce that effect and improve the experience. And maybe if you've looked much at this game, you will notice some improvement as we look at more and more footage during the course of this video. As I recall, this footage was taken quite shortly after the previous footage, because here I am trying to do what I explained in the last clip, but failing. You can tell that I think the dark green slopes here do in fact show the sort of effect that I want, but the cliff sides certainly don't and are extremely high contrast. But I thought the footage is so spectacular, I just had to show it. Here is an effect that I think is rather gorgeous. It's more color shifting based on distance as I zoom out into outer space. And the sort of half-moon shape of the world that I draw with my long-distance renderer goes through essentially the whole color spectrum, because it's so far beyond the maximum draw distance that it doesn't know what to do. That's kind of the reason. It looks pretty much like a setting sun, at least in some phases, and that's a pretty good lead-in to the subject of a skybox. Now, a skybox is something I've always wanted, but I did a few experiments back in the really early prototype stage, before I knew that I wanted to even make a game. I was just experimenting with 3D. And I wasn't at all happy with either of those effects or results, so I haven't really tried since. I wanted to give it another go. Now, I just want to point out here as we go back that you can quite clearly see how, as I said, that colorful part, that's the sort of long-distance renderer, long-distance landscape renderer, and the little green dot at the bottom, that's the full 3D render that is kind of exists as a cylinder centered around the player. And then this view is also quite spectacular. This sort of landscape will not really be in the game, like this, with these weird columns and stuff. That's for testing purposes. But it certainly looks pretty cool with this black background and the fade to bright blue and all that. These are screenshots from an old first-person open-world RPG from the 90s called Ravenloft Stone Prophet. And it is the greatest reason by far why I want skyboxes in Warlock's Gantlet. Because I think this skybox is absolutely gorgeous and adds so much to the atmosphere of this game. I've never played this, but I have seen 2 full playthroughs of it, and I think it's a really good game from what I can tell, and I really enjoy looking at it. It's so beautiful. Now in this game, it appears that the skybox is just a horizontal strip, because you can't look up and down in this game, though you can look freely in all directions otherwise. Back when I tried out my 2 skyboxes in the prototype stage, I used 2 different approaches. One similar to this, with a singular bitmap that I kind of scrolled left, right, up and down depending on which way you were looking. But I was never able to achieve a parallaxing effect that was convincing. It always looked weird when you looked at the foreground, the geometry of the level behaving one way, and the background, the skybox or sky texture, not really parallaxing in a way that you would expect. It looked pretty much like a piece of a set, you know. Now the other approach I had was to build an actual box, like the inside of a dice, or sorry, a die with 6 sides, and just attach a texture to each of them. So like a cube, but seen from the inside. And it looked better, certainly, but you could also very clearly tell that it was only 6 sides, because so few textures really makes it difficult to hide the seams. Now I considered sometimes to make maybe a more complex geometric shape and put textures on that, but if I made it very complex, as consisting of multiple triangles, as I guess is the norm, I wouldn't really know how to texture map that in a way that would be simple. I would have to kind of advance my understanding of 3D texture mapping several levels just to achieve that. And I thought, well, that's a task for the next engine, not this engine, even though I've been updating this engine and advancing it far beyond what I thought I would. That's a bit too far. So I trashed that idea. But then I came up with another one, which seemed sort of promising. What if I didn't have a sky box, but just sky objects? Like a sun and one or several moons and stuff like that. Would that work? And so I tried that, and I'd like to show you what that looks like. Now I hope you can forgive me, but before showing you what it looks like currently, I'd like to show you this clip of a very buggy, very colorful effect that I caught. But I haven't started it yet because this is probably one of those times when I should give an epilepsy warning, because this flickers and blinks to an extreme extent. So if you are sensitive, look away or close your eyes or something, and I will tell you when it's safe to look again. Here we go. This is a rainbow funhouse extravaganza extraordinaire. And apparently I think I've also set my movement speed quite high, so I'm zooming around this landscape of rainbow colors. It looks very much like maybe a malfunctioning TV set or something like that. For the most part it's not a pleasant thing to look at, but I am also glad that I caught it on camera, or caught it on video. There is a sun looking not much like a sun. Well, I think that might be enough of that. Just wanted to show it, and now it is safe to look again. I have stopped the video. Here we have the sun shooting across an early morning sky. Now it's moving rather faster than it's supposed to. I've set the day-night cycle to 2 minutes here, just so I can show you the whole spectacle in a reasonable time frame. Normally I will have it at around 30 or 40 minutes, probably, although there are many factors to consider there. Gameplay mechanics that will affect my final decision, so I don't know exactly what it'll be. Now, I have 2 fully texture mapped objects in the sky, a sun and the moon, although there might be more moons eventually, and maybe other things. Also several thousand stars, and let's look at the sunset first, as the sky goes through a color change, and the sun increases in size and changes color too. As the sky grows darker, the stars appear, and they rotate around they rotate horizontally around a vertical axis, whereas the sun and the moon rotate or orbit actually in a sort of slanted course, to make it more interesting. I am very happy with how this has turned out. It's not the same effect as in Stone Prophet, but it's also not all that far off. And I think it adds very much to the game. It actually doesn't really affect performance almost at all. And I've even had many more stars than this. But I think this is a pretty good balance of stars. I use slightly different colors for the dawn and dusk transitions so that they will be, you know, different feels to morning and evening. That's the whole cycle. You'll definitely see more of it as we move forward, even in this video. I can also show you the first look here at some new features, at least this new tree. This is only a couple of weeks old, I think, or a few weeks old. And let's move on and show some other new features, because this is not all at all. Now the time has come to talk about dynamic lighting, or dynamic lights, which is something I was not sure I would be able to implement at all in this new version of the engine, because as I went from a 3-dimensional to a 2-dimensional data structure for the world, I also ruined the old dynamic lighting system, which depended on that 3-dimensionality. I was working with kind of directed 3-dimensional flood fill algorithm. So I had to sort of rack my brain to figure out a way to do it on a 2D world texture. But eventually I did, and I could allay my fears. It does, when I have a lot of lights, it does take a toll on performance. Not a huge toll, but a noticeable one. You'll see that the frame rate goes down here. Now, that's not just because of the lights, because it's also because of the town or small city here. It has a lot more polygons to render than the open sort of wilderness beyond. But just like essentially everything else, the implementation of dynamic light has gone very well, and you know, the results are above my expectations, above my best hopes actually. And right now I don't think that there is any more satisfying experience in this game than to walk around these nighttime streets. There's so much to look at, like the combination of the procedurally generated houses, blocks of houses and streets, and likewise placement of street lights makes it so that every single portion of the town is different. There's something new around every corner. Every part of the town is unique. As we can see if we fly up a bit here. I don't think you'll find any repetitive patterns anywhere. It's quite interesting to look down on it like this and see the darker neighborhoods or blocks, if you like, and the brighter spots. Now, as you know, I render the world differently in the great distance, and you can kind of see the cutoff point halfway through the town there, where in the distance the lights are sort of orange blobs rather than applied with great detail onto individual polygons as they are here. There is actually some raycasting going on, which I didn't think that I would ever use in this engine, but here we are. Not much, mind you, there's one ray per polygon per light. But it's much more than I thought I would ever use, but using that I get slightly better directional dynamic lighting than I had in the previous engine, as far as I can tell, or the previous version. So very happy to show this off. I do plan to actually make some videos just walking around like this, because I think it's, at this point, this experience is so good visually, so satisfying, that I think I want to make videos of this, just like I do. I show on my streams videos that I've filmed when I'm walking in the real world. This is already good enough to show off. I personally just like to start up the game and stroll around these streets, because it's such a visual delight. And there are new experiences every time. That's one of the things I love about procedural generation, that the game can present surprises to me all the time. This looks cool. How the light sort of wraps around the corners of this house and then fades into, or merges with light from other sources. Oh, it's so good. I am very proud of this. I hope you can forgive me that. I hope you can look past my pride and just enjoy it for what it is. I get the urge to take screenshots similarly to how I get the urge to take snapshots, photographs, when I'm out walking and I see something nice in reality. And that's no bad thing. You might have noticed there that the tree is illuminated and then it isn't. These rotating so-called billboard sprites are illuminated if they are facing a light, and of course they always face you, so it changes depending on how you go. I might change that a little bit, like they're still going to change, but there is at least one alternative way of doing that might look a little bit less jarring. I don't hate it now, but it is a little bit weird, of course, to be looking at a surface that doesn't really change, but suddenly it's like someone switched on a light in front of it. That can be weird. Otherwise, very happy with this. Here are a few screenshots that I took whilst developing the dynamic lights. This is with a snowy landscape, and usually I was using 3 different lights: a blue, a red, and a green one. I didn't take much footage of this, like video footage, and it's a bit of a hassle to set up again, so I hope you can make do with these screenshots. There will be more, shall we say, festively colored lighting in the game eventually. Again, we'll have colored spells streaking across interesting landscapes eventually. I just want to show this off because it looks quite exciting out in the wilderness with you can see here some how it creates interesting shadows on hills and such. It can look very, very dramatic. So look forward to that, but right now can't really see it. Here is some interesting intermediate version of the long distance light application. You can discern here the long distance light isn't just a blob, it does take into account its surroundings to some extent. So here you can see some trees being illuminated, for example. And of course some weird mixing of blue and red here, turning into purple. In fact, I think this is there's a transition period in the intermediate distance between the long and short distance. There has to be a transition period, because otherwise there's a risk that the light kind of flicks off for at a particular distance where it's kind of in between both. There has to be an overlap, and so either it flicks off or it's extra bright for a little while. I chose extra bright. Here we have an old friend in new clothes. This is the redesigned Lich sprite, which I'm very happy with the design of. I've sort of imagined them like this for a long time, and this looks much more like a kind of final design to me. The previous one was always, in my mind, a kind of placeholder. Now, I don't really have them in the landscape currently, so that's why I'm showing this still image. I can spawn them in, they don't move around yet. And or I can kind of pose one of them where I want. But I would have to change some code in order to do that again, so next time you see them, they will probably be roaming around freely. And I don't think that'll be very long into the future. It's just that right now they're not that interesting, apart from just looking at them. And I have a variant I made for the holiday. I don't know if I'll have this one in the game at all, but I was working on well, transparency. That's one thing that I use these for, experimenting with. That's a new feature. I don't think I ever had transparency in the engine before, so that's very nice. I was also working on a snowy landscape, and I thought that a red lich in the snowy landscape would be fitting. I have another. There we go. I have this snowy version and also a new spruce, snow-covered spruce tree sprite. It's not great, but it's better than the previous one, I think. Again, I don't really have a snowy landscape in the game currently. I'm mostly working on the towns presently, so we will get to that shortly. But I wanted to show off this stuff because I've also put these things in the game. They're kind of just temporarily out, just so I can focus on other things. But they are there, and the transparency will be there. Also for things like puffs of smoke when you fire a gun, or you know, the remainders from an explosion, or maybe some gas cloud, stuff like that. I think it will be very useful and effectful. Here we have something as exciting as a text document, although I do think you might find it interesting to peruse this. Even the tiny portion I'm showing to you here. Nothing that you see here is final. These are my own thoughts and my own little experiments, but it's far from everything, and again, nothing here is final, so don't take this as gospel or established lore or anything. But I wanted to show you because I started making this document a few weeks ago, because I've gotten to the point where I need to seriously consider world design. Obviously my world is procedurally generated, but I want to curate a very specific experience. So even though I want there to be multiple, you know, possible to generate many different configurations of the world, it must have there are a large number of features that the world must have to meet my sort of design standards. So my procedural generation is full of constraints, very specific constraints. So there will, you know, you will. The idea is that you have the same kind of experience, but just a new experience of the same sort, and possibly the number of possible configurations of the world might not be that large. Maybe it's going to be as low as 10, I don't know. I think more in the hundreds, but maybe not more than a few hundred. I have nothing against that. I doubt that the majority of people will want to play this game more than 100 times. And some might even want to replay the same map, because it's going to be quite large. I am currently thinking of making the map 32 by 32 kilometers, which would be 1024 square kilometers. I think that would be a good size. I'm more or less settled on that, actually. But I haven't tested such a big map yet, so I will have to check whether there is some sort of problem with that. I have tested one that's 16 by 16, if I remember correctly, and that worked well. So that's all right. That's just a fourth. As you can see, I've started to take into consideration what sort of environments there will be, and also stuff like walking speed and distances. And this has all to do with the kind of experience I want to provide. There are many factors to consider. You can see up there that I'm thinking about, well, if you walk at this rate, you will walk this far in this long a time, and that's important to make the world feel big. You can't move too fast. If you move too fast, the world will feel very small. But if you move too slowly, most people will get bored out of their mind before they get anywhere. So it's going to be a balance of something in between, of course, and providing just enough content to kind of keep it interesting. Now, whether there will be fast travel or not is something I am thinking about a lot recently. And I really haven't come to any conclusions. I think if there will be any, it will be very little. But I'll get to that in a moment as I discuss the next point here, or one of the next points. Here we are, back in broad daylight, in the same town we were in before. And I wanted to talk a little bit about houses, a few things. First of all, a little bit about how I generate them. Currently, whenever I make a town or village or something like that, I generate blocks of houses. The blocks are not allowed to overlap, but houses within a block can overlap slightly. So I have a few basic templates, like 2.5 essentially, 2 and then a slight variation on one of them, that I use over and over and over. But because they are allowed to overlap slightly, you get really peculiar combinations like these. And that makes for some super interesting shapes. Especially, it looks even better, I'd say, when you're down on the streets, as we have been already. Because you don't see the whole shape, so just as in a real town, you kind of just see one portion, and usually if you walk around a real town, you see blocks of houses that are a combination of multiple other buildings, or multiple buildings. And I find that the effect is quite similar. Now, as you can tell, there are oddities like these windows that open onto half a roof, and even I think a door. These are just kind of bugs I haven't weeded out yet about how the houses are textured, but very minor things. I am going to add several more types of houses and texture sets, and probably slightly different algorithms for different blocks of houses, because I think some of the types of houses I make might not look as good when they overlap, for example. But nevertheless, it's coming, and I already think these are pretty good, but I want the towns to be very exciting to explore, It should be like exploring a new town in reality. Now, with regards to whether or not you can enter these, as some people have wondered in my streams, first of all, there will be some buildings that you can enter and actually walk around in, but those will be huge buildings, like maybe palaces, castles, large, maybe like a university or a library as well. These ones, not so much. And those other locations, they will essentially be considered dungeons, and I don't think I will program it, or program in the ability to see out of those buildings. So don't expect to walk into a castle, walk to this 3rd floor, and then look out across the world, because it's just a bit too complex to do that in my engine. It's not really written with that in mind, so it has shortcomings in that regard. So if you enter a house, it'll be kind of like a separate instance, just like if you enter an underground dungeon, or enter a large building. But these houses, they might be enterable to some extent. Now, there will be things like shops and inns, and maybe a smithies, stuff like that, where you can trade, and those will be menus. So you go to the door of a shop, you interact with it, and you are brought to a shop menu, for example. As I mentioned previously, early in this video, that I would do. And there is a possibility that almost every house will have some kind of a menu, but if you just go and knock on the door of some commoner, you might get into a kind of an NPC interaction screen, essentially, just as if you walked up to a commoner and tried to talk to them. Which I want you to be able to do, although I don't think that there will be much in the way of sophisticated conversation in this game. That's not what the focus is. But I admire games like Daggerfall and Arena that had really interesting, I thought, interactions with commoners. And they did a lot with a little, so that the commoners they don't have much of a personality there, but they do have a lot of information, actually. I don't think I'll reach that level, but I will try to make it so that you can interact to some extent with everyone, and that might extend to these houses. So the houses will be sort of representatives of people, if you like. All right, let's talk a little bit about towns and villages and roads and civilization and road networks. Here I am at a large plaza by a crossroads of 3 roads. If we look at the world map, dink, you can see I am actually in the southeast corner, in that where 3 big roads meet in a big town. This map is roughly 8 by 8 kilometers, so around 64 square kilometers, which is barely, or a little bit more than 1/20th of the full final map, if my arithmetic is correct. The full map will not have this kind of density of towns and roads. The interconnected communities will occupy a relatively small portion of the final world map. I do want you to start there, but I want the most of the world to be kind of wild and difficult to explore. You need resources to go into the rest of the world, and the network of interconnected by roads, towns, villages and such will kind of be your safety net. The places you return, or the areas you return to after a long excursion into the unknown, and replenish yourself using the resources you have gathered in the forms of treasure, money, loot. That's the idea. That said, I'm currently working specifically on the generation of towns and the network of roads and such, so that's why I've made them disproportionately large here. That's because that's the focus. To the extent that there will be fast travel, I don't know yet if there will be at all, but if there is, it's likely to happen along these roads. So you might be able to, travel by some sort of maybe a Skyrim-like system of horse and cart between these places, and you might even be able to sleep on that cart. I'm not sure that I mentioned it before because this video is getting very long, but I intend for resource management to be important. I'm going to try to make it painless, or as painless as possible, but also important. So you have to think about having rations, sleep to regain health and energy, stuff like that. Again, I want to make it mostly semi-automatic, but something that you have to consider and something that will affect you, so that you can't just roam about the countryside at free. I like the idea that you have to think about, I have to find a place to sleep tonight or soon because I'm running low on energy, stuff like that. I think that's exciting, personally. So a fast travel option could confer an opportunity. If you spend the money, the advantage is that you get to sleep and replenish your energy and get to the next town, maybe closer to your destination, rather than actively walking and losing energy or having to make camp along the way, which won't be as efficient. Like if you make camp in the wilderness, you won't sleep as well as in a nice hotel bedroom, etc. I think that might be the gist of what I wanted to say here. By the way, this is one of the strongest contenders for walking speed. You can see it says speed 200 down there in the corner. I think this, yeah, it is quite fast compared to others I've considered, but I think if I go significantly slower than this, it will be too boring. And I've calculated, I think it takes about 80 minutes to walk across the map on a cardinal axis at this speed, if the map is 32 kilometers. Now the world is supposed to be huge, so you're not really meant to, traverse the whole map in one go. There's not supposed to be a time when you need to do that in one go. Like the game is supposed to be structured so that you have something to do in between those points for the most part, or at least it'll be somewhat exciting to do that. But I also don't want you to be able to traverse the world in a ridiculously short amount of time on foot. Now you will be able to probably jog, maybe something like this, in order to just kind of shorten some distances, but this should consume a much larger amount of energy. So it's something that you have to take into consideration. You want to move faster, you have to kind of accept the cost, and you might want to do that, might not. Like that comes out of your healing potions and your ammunition and your rations and all of that. If you got this far, thank you very much for listening. And it's kind of interesting to wrap it up or summarize it like this, because all of this has happened in the last 4 months, barely that, and it's really gone very fast, from starting almost from scratch again and just kind of getting the engine up and running, showing text on screen and showing flat 2D textures or sprites on screen, and then to this, like an open world that is more sophisticated than any I've done before, that with a much greater draw distance, better sprites, dynamic lighting, towns, roads, and a bit more, a more interesting environment. I haven't done all that much with it yet, but it's getting decent. I sped up the day-night cycle again so we can get some variety here, and I can show off my my lamp or torch that I'm carrying with me for the night time, because it gets quite dark. I wanted to talk a little bit about what I'm going to do next. Let's turn on the torch here. There we go. So you can see where we're going. You can see how dark it gets first, I suppose. Should go very quickly. There we go. You can barely see anything. I'm thinking of actually making it even darker than this, because that should be an interesting aspect of the night. This torch is pretty helpful, but I like the idea of the night being very dark and a little bit scary, Anyway, what to do next? There are so many things that I could focus on next, and I haven't quite decided. Like, should I focus on putting shops in the buildings? Should I focus on just making more interesting buildings? Should I focus on putting in NPCs that walk around in the towns? Or getting the liches back in and getting them moving? Or focusing on making some other environment, like having more diversity in the environment? There are so many things, but right now it feels like I'm in a very good spot where much of the basics of the engine are in place, and I'm already starting to kind of flesh it out, with the town generation and such. That's not a basic thing, that's a development of more like game design than engine design. Not all of the engine is finished, like there are things left for sure, but I'm certainly working with game mechanics now as well, and game features, design features and such, and to already be back in that and kind of deeply into that already, that feels really good. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I can't promise that the next devlog will come out, you know, in a shorter interval than this. I'm very happy that this one didn't take another year to make, or to get to. I hope that I'll make them maybe even a bit more frequently now, because the way things are going, I'm making something that I find to be worth talking about like every other week. Hence why this is such a comprehensive and long video. There are many things to talk about, and I'm sure I've missed a few things even so. If you want to follow the development more closely, you can hop onto my Discord or my Twitch channel, where I stream live, and find out more there. I stream a lot of the game development live, not all of it, but a portion of it, and you're always welcome to ask questions about the design, about the game, about the progress if you drop in there. And I do updates in the Discord and on my BlueSky account quite a lot. And all of these things will be linked in the description of this video, so enjoy that if you want to. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you have a lovely remainder of this day, and well, I'll see you sometime on any one of those accounts. Goodbye.